Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blink Conversations of Life, Love, and Gratitude. I'm your host, Tanisha Campbell, one of four community relations coordinators. And at Gift of Life Michigan, we understand that life can happen in the blink of an eye. So we hope to be able to share those stories. This series will feature donor families, recipients, volunteers, and advocates. The Blink is designed to bring you real stories. And if you would like to sign up and be a guest on The Blink, you can contact me, Tanisha Campbell, at tcampbell@golm.org or visit Volunteer Hub. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Dominick, who has a very interesting story. Dominick had a multivisceral transplant, and I am going to bring Dominick on to share his story and allow you to understand what a multivisceral transplant is. Welcome, Dominick.
Hello.
Hi, Dominick.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on the Blink today. I'm excited you're here. And I'm really excited to share your story. I think your story may be the first story that I heard of a multivisceral transplant. So if you want to, can you tell us a little bit of your background and a little bit about who you are?
Absolutely. My name is Dominick. I am originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I moved here to Michigan in the early 2000s. I currently live with my wife of 19 years and our four children.
Well, congratulations on that 19-year wedding, and especially on your anniversary and everything that you have coming up. Let's talk about what you have experienced that has happened to you in a blink of an eye.
Yep, it started back in 2014. I had developed a case of gallstone pancreatitis and put me in the hospital for a few days. Initially, they wanted to send me to see a gastroenterologist, but instead they sent me to a surgeon instead. I had my gallbladder removed October of that year. Fast forward a couple years later, in 2016, I started having cases where I was nauseous all the time. I was vomiting. I started having abdominal pain. So my primary care physician sent me to a gastroenterologist. They were checking for chronic pancreatitis. They did a colonoscopy first. That looked clean. And then he recommended they do what's called an endoscopic ultrasound. So I went in, they did the endoscopic ultrasound, and they thought what they saw was a gallstone in my common bile duct that would have to be removed. So they scheduled that for a couple days later. It was on the 20th of December of 2016. And I went in for what's called an ERCP. And when I woke up from the procedure, I was in just intense abdominal pain. It was the worst pain imaginable. And I instantly knew that something wasn't right. So the gastro that did it had explained that he had nicked my bile duct and put a stent in, and that he spoke to the hospitalist and they agreed to keep me overnight for observation if I chose to stay. So I chose to stay. They came in, drew labs the following morning on the 21st of December, and they found that I had pancreatitis and I was going to be in the hospital over Christmas.
Oh, wow.
So the day after that, on the 22nd of December, my kidneys started having issues and I was having some difficulty breathing. So they called in the rapid response nurses. They came in. I had one nurse take a look at me and she said to me that that wasn't her normal job. Her job was in the intensive care unit and that she needed to go speak with her boss, but she would be back to check on me later. About an hour after that, she came back in with another nurse and a doctor, and the doctor had informed me that they were going to move me over to the intensive care unit. When I got to the intensive care unit, they told me I looked like $1 million and you would never know I was sick. And within several hours after that, about 4 to 5 hours after that, I just completely crashed. They had to intubate. I ended up spending 2 weeks on the ventilator. She initially, the physician thought I wasn't going to make it out, but I had survived that. I spent about a month in the hospital. They discharged me, which I never should have been discharged. The physician at the hospital knew that I wanted to go home because I was missing my family. But the day they discharged me, I was running a temperature of 103.
Oh, wow, Dominic.
But they let me go home. 3 days after that, I had a return for lab work. They drew the labs, and right after that, I got a call from my primary stating that I needed to immediately get back to the hospital because they had taken blood cultures, which usually things grow in about 2 to 3 days, which is another reason they discharged me, because they had taken blood cultures and nothing had grown. Well, this was now 5 days later, and on the fifth day, my culture tested positive for both a bacterial and fungal infection.
Oh, wow.
They put me back in the hospital. That hospital, the gastro I spoke to that day said to me that he felt like I was beyond anything they could do for me there. So I ended up getting transferred to another facility. They treated me. Things were going fantastic. I was feeling like my old self by April of 2017. So they had discharged me from their gastroenterology and their infectious disease practice. Fast forward to October of 2017, I developed another severe case of pancreatitis. That put me back in the hospital for slightly over a week. And from there, it had just been a whirlwind of effects. I developed necrotizing pancreatitis that eventually it killed my entire pancreas. I developed blood clots. They went in and tried to do a recanalization where they removed the clots, put stents in to open up my portal vein because I had developed portal hypertension. That was successful initially, but they wanted to send me to a pancreatic surgeon because they felt that if they removed the dead portion of my pancreas, I might not have the issues with having the recurrent pancreatitis. But they needed to do a CT scan before the surgeon would see me. So I went and had the CT done 4 days after they did the recanalization. And when I met the surgeon, he had explained to me and showed me the CT images that the stent they put in that portal vein had clotted within 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And because of the hypertension, if he tried to operate and remove the pancreas, I would have bled out on the operating table.
So one thing that I definitely want to bring attention to is that it's always great when you have medical staff who understands and knows exactly what they're doing and know how to bring in other people that are in places where they can assist and help you and move you to eventually become better. I think your story so far is definitely a story of hope, and definitely a story of the power that you have within your own self, a little bit of power of healing and things like that. And I like how you didn't give up. Even like when you really wanted to go home, you went and got your blood work done. When they told you to go back into the hospital, you followed their instructions and went back to the hospital. But what I want to get into and what I think people may not know about or understand is what a multivisceral transplant is. So could you explain a little bit of that to us?
Absolutely. Initially, they had wanted to do a simple liver transplant, but because of the portal hypertension, along with the clot I had in my SMV and my IMV, they couldn't do just the simple liver. So the surgeon in Illinois had explained to me that what I needed was called a multivisceral transplant. And I had another surgeon previously tell me that I would need a multi-organ transplant, but this was the first time I had ever heard of a multivisceral. I had no idea what it entailed, what it was. So I had spoke to the surgeon that was going to do the procedure, and he explained to me that it was a 5-organ transplant done simultaneously. All the organs come from the same donor, and they replace the liver, the pancreas, the stomach, and the small and large intestine.
Wow. So when were you listed? When were you put on the wait list
I was officially listed the 9th of July of last year.
of last year? And when were you transplanted?
1 month later, on the 8th of August.
Oh wow. I could just imagine how excited you were when somebody came in the room and said that, hey, I have a transplant. I have a multivisceral transplant available for you. Were you in the hospital? Were you at home? How did you
Uh,
receive the information?
I was in the local emergency room
Okay.
when I received the call from my coordinator. Initially, she had told me that the surgeon had thought he found a match, and he was out looking at the organs to make sure they were good and viable, and to keep my phone by me in case she called back. So she hung up with me. About 20 minutes later, she called back, said that it was in fact a match, and she asked me how quickly I could make it to the hospital. Fortunately, I had a very good physician in the emergency room who overheard the conversation because I had it on speakerphone, and he just looked at me and told me go.
Okay. Wow. And what were your thoughts? When we hear multivisceral, we're always, and I'll share this a little bit. I'm a kidney recipient as well. So we're always excited on our end. But then we often have to think about the donor and their family as well. So what was going through your mind at that moment when you realized somebody had to lose their life to save yours?
It hit me pretty hard. It hit me the day after I was transplanted. Uh,
Okay.
Up that morning, and I was in tears. They ended up having to call the chaplain because it really hit me, and that's when the guilt really hit, because here I am excited that I get this second chance of life, but knowing at the same time that there's a family out there mourning the loss of their loved one who unfortunately had to lose their life so that they could save mine.
And if you could say a few words to that family, what would you say, Dominic?
I would just tell them that I think of their loved one often. It was about a month after transplant, I did receive a letter from my donor's family.
Okay.
They sent a photo along with it, so that kind of made it real, because now I know who my donor was. I know about what her likes were, who she was, so that made it real. And I did respond. I sent them two letters, and I'm getting ready to write them again here soon.
That's awesome. I know oftentimes some people are unable to connect with their donor families. And I think it's awesome that you were able to connect with yours. Through all of this that you had going on, who was your support system and how did they handle the news of you needing a multivisceral transplant?
My family was definitely my biggest support system. My mother, my wife. My wife was definitely by far my largest supporter, and then my in-laws. And she took it rough at first. It's hard hearing that you need a 5-organ transplant. And fortunately, the surgeon was brutally honest with the two of us, and he had told us from the beginning that this essentially was the only option I had. Had I chose not to go forward with the transplant, we would not be having this conversation right now.
We're definitely grateful that we're able to have this conversation right now. Thinking back on when you were waiting for the transplant, what are some things that you are able to do now that you weren't able to do during your wait for a transplant?
I'm starting to get some of my strength back, so it's nice to be able to go out and play catch with my children and run around, roughhouse with them a little bit more. These are things that I was so deathly thin and fragile that I couldn't do these things while I was waiting for the transplant.
Yeah. And what's some advice that you would share with somebody who is waiting for a transplant at this present moment?
The best advice is just try to find the humor in things. There's humor in everything. Live your life. Don't hesitate. It's so easy to get angry or depressed. So I just always tried to find the humor and the fun side in things, and just live every day like it's your last.
Yeah, you definitely become more grateful for each and every day. You become grateful for each and every second of the day. Um, and let's see, after transplant, I understand, like, the next day you realized about the donor family, but when did you realize that the transplant had really taken place?
It was several days after. Several
Yeah.
days I had woke up, and it's kind of when it really hit that this was real. And it was the first time I was actually able to physically look and see the staples
Mhm.
where the surgeon had performed the operation.
And how often do you have to see your physicians now?
I graduated, as they like to say. Initially, it was once every single month, and now I'm down to once every 3 months.
That's exciting. Well, we definitely want to congratulate you on your upcoming transplant versary. And we're excited that you were able to be here and share your story with us today. I can definitely see you coming back on and sharing more of your story, and possibly having a physician come on and explain more of it to us. Um, this is definitely the first time I believe the first time I've heard about a multivisceral transplant. I may be incorrect, but I know it's definitely first time that I've actually learned or spoken with somebody who had a multivisceral transplant. So I really want to thank you for coming on and not just sharing your story, but also educating us about what a multivisceral transplant is and just sharing your story in general. Thank you for coming on with us today, Dominick.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we are excited that Dominick was able to come on and share his story with us today. As always, I would like to thank you all for joining us here on The Blink. You can also join us this Saturday at Life Walk Run, and that will be virtually on Gift of Life Michigan, MOTEP's Facebook page. And as always, sign up on the Michigan Organ Donor Registry at golm.org. And until next time, you can sign up, or if you want to be on the show, email me at tcampbell@golm.org or visit Volunteer Hub. Thank you for coming today, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on the next The Blink.